Hello, I want to thank you for joining me today on my presentation of my trip to New York City as a part of our brown bag travel presentations. My name is Julia Rhodes, and my trip to New York City lasted for 2 days, and it featured me going to see Hamilton on Broadway, as well as seeing the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and the Empire State Building. We are going to start with a little bit of a trip background here. So the trip background was that Hamilton had been out for about a year at this point. I took my trip in in June of 2016, and I was just perusing ticket resales in May. And I happened to be looking around the time of my birthday, and I found a ticket for face value, a rarity in the ticket resale game. And I decided to plan a whole entire trip around seeing Hamilton on Broadway. And that trip was planned in less than a month, and was my first trip by myself and my first trip to New York City. It took 2.5 days total, and it was quite an experience. So this first slide here that we're going to see is me outside of the Richard Rodgers Theater. This was the first day. Saturday, June 11th was when I landed that afternoon, and then I left Tuesday, June 14th on my birthday. But this was the Saturday afternoon. I went and took photos outside of the Richard Rodgers, and I went and looked around Times Square a little bit and got settled into my hotel room, which you can see the view out of on more streets of Broadway here with other theaters and other shows. Now this is Saturday night. I decided to go and see the stage door exits to see if I could catch any of the stars leaving the show. Here we have the theater all lit up. And then I was able to meet Leslie Odom Jr. He's standing there in front of his own silhouette. He plays Aaron Burr in the show. And then I also met Rory O'Malley, who played King George. And then I took some photos in front of the theater, holding the Rolling Stone magazine that I had them sign for me. All in all, great first night in New York City, I must say. So, Sunday morning rolls around, and I have time before my matinee show that afternoon. My main goal was to see and get to the Nintendo store to purchase some gifts for some friends. And the Nintendo store just happens to be inside the Rockefeller compound at Rockefeller Center. So we're going to get a little bit of background on Rockefeller Center here. It was built starting in 1928 when John D. Rockefeller leased the land from Columbia University. Now this land covered 22 acres, and he built 19 commercial buildings on that 22 acres, composing 3 square blocks. It took quite a long time to actually build. Rockefeller Center 30 Rock, just one building in the compound. The one behind that golden statue right there that stands tall amongst the skyline of New York City, took 7 years to build itself. Construction lasted from 1932 to 1939. In 1931, obviously, as the Great Depression was going on, spirits were a little low. So some of the construction workers started to pool their money together and held a tree lighting ceremony for themselves. This occurred the next year, and so in 1933, it became an official annual tradition at Rockefeller Center. and grew into the enormous event that we know today. In 1985, the Rockefeller compound received New York City landmark status, and in 1987, it received National Historic Landmark status. Of the 19 commercial buildings, only 12 of them received this status, and that's because they are all built in the same style, and they're all sort of connected to each other in the same area. So that's why the status is only on 12 of the 19 total buildings sitting on the 22 commercial acres. Here we have, clockwise, from the top left to the bottom left, we have me walking down the Avenue of Americas, and you see on the right side of that first photo, the buildings that make up the Rockefeller compound right there. Then you have in the middle on the top Radio City Music Hall. And then we have the flags that surround the Rockefeller Center ice rink, which in the summer they turn it into a nice little restaurant and cafe. And so that's what I got to experience while there. Then we have the entrance for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. The actual full photo of 30 Rockefeller Center, and the top of the rock observation deck entrance, where you can get amazing shots of all of the New York City skyline, including Central Park. Now, this was my main goal to achieve that morning, the Nintendo store. As you can see, they have quite spectacular little presentations throughout the store. It consists of 10,000 square feet over 2 stories. They have gaming centers. They have set up retail areas for you to choose from your from your favorite games or favorite shows or just everything. The Pokemon area was fantastic. It's just a great experience overall. Now, there are many art installations throughout New York City. The 2 I'm going to focus on were the ones that were featured where we currently are in my trip, which was at 30 Rock. This first one is Elm Green and Dragset Van Gogh's Ear, which is a large-scale sculptural installation that you see right as you come in towards Rockefeller Center from the 5th Avenue entrance. And as you can see behind it, there are a lot of shop fronts that have display windows. Some of those display windows are actually available for other displays and presentations. And Lego just happened to have a glass display in one of those displays. We have the golden figure at 30 Rock, as well as a nice little dragon, and then actual 30 Rock in Lego. There were a lot of other Legos, but I thought I'd feature these 2. It was quite a wonderful little setup. And here we are on Sunday afternoon, Showtime, for my matinee. So, all Sunday shows for Hamilton and most Broadway shows are matinees. You never get a guarantee for original cast members. This is true with all shows. You never know if someone's going to be sick, or if they're going to need to reserve their voice for something else, or if they have to be featured somewhere. And since my performance was the same day as the Tonys, I was not expecting much of the original cast to be performing. However, when I got in there and sat down and the performance started, I was astounded to see every single member of the cast performing in their role. It was spectacular and just something I would love to go back and see again. If I could go back in time and revisit it, I would. So let's get a little bit of background information on Hamilton. It was written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who was inspired by Ron Chernow's biography of Hamilton, which he was reading while he was vacationing from his current Broadway musical In the Heights that he was starring in. The film for that is set to be released June 11th, 2021. And on his diverse casting, he was quoted as saying, "Our cast looks like America looks now," and that is certainly intentional. It was off Broadway at the Public from February until August of 2015. Then it opened at the Richard Rodgers August 16th of 2015 to immediate popularity and success. It takes a lot of liberties from Hamilton's life, but it does quote direct source material, including the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, the Reynolds pamphlet, personal letters from a bunch of different historical figures, and it even cites Macbeth. There's a book that has been released called Hamilton the Revolution that details the show and includes behind-the-scenes stories, photos, and experiences from the cast and everybody of the show, and detailed footnotes for the songs and lyrics from Lin-Manuel Miranda. You can find it at your local SGCL library. Just ask a reference librarian, and they'll be happy to put it on hold for you. There was something called the Ham for Ham lottery. Most musicals do have lotteries where you can get a selection of from a selection of tickets or standing room tickets. The Ham for Ham lottery tickets were for front row seats. They had about 24 for each show that were available, and then some standing room. Now, what Ham for Ham stands for is you would pay one Hamilton, $10, for Hamilton, to see Hamilton. So Ham for Ham. If you won the lottery, you got up to 2 tickets for yourself. And this was offered with street performances hosted mostly by Lin-Manuel. If he couldn't make it, he would have one of the other cast members or special guests step in. There were a lot of guest performers that came out because they wanted to be a part of Ham for Ham or part of Hamilton in some way. Over time, as it became more and more popular, it caused such congestion of not only foot traffic, but actual street traffic on 46th Street, where the Richard Rodgers sits, that eventually they had to take the event virtual. They did some digital Ham for Hams. The first online lottery, however, had over 50,000 entrants worldwide, and it crashed the website. As we know, Hamilton was nominated for 16 Tony Awards, of which it won 11. And then it also received the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. So here we're going to see a couple photos from inside the theater before the show started. This is one of the souvenir cups that you could have gotten. And this was during the intermission. As you can see, the stairs are in the center stage. This is during the cast's final bows. And then, of course, you have to take a selfie with the stage. As I left, I noticed that there was a bus marked Tony's right outside the cast exit, the exit doors. So I made my way up there, of course, having to take another selfie with the theater. And I was able to meet and see Chris Jackson, who plays George Washington, Philippa Sue, who plays Eliza Hamilton, and Renee Elise Goldsberry, who plays Angelica Schuyler. This bus was taking everyone to the Tony Awards, or if they were having to, like, more popular characters, like main characters, they would have their own cars come and get them. So, like Chris, who played George Washington, and Philippa and Renee, who played the sisters, they went in their own cars, and then a lot of other people, they loaded their equipment and stuff onto the bus and went to the Tonys that way. So this was a great way to meet them. We have on this slide some chorus members who were loading into the bus as well, fully costumed and everything. And then we have Javier Munoz Jr., who has been Lin-Manuel's understudy for the past 2 decades now, I believe. He is a beautiful soul, and if you adore Lin-Manuel Miranda, I suggest you learn a little bit more about Javi here, because look at that beautiful smile. He is a wonderful person, and honestly, there wouldn't be as good of a performance from Lin-Manuel if Javi wasn't there behind him. This is Jasmine Cephas Jones, who plays Aunt Peggy Schuyler. This is Okiriete Onadoen. He plays James Madison and Hercules Mulligan in the show. And this is the lovely Anthony Ramos, who plays John Lawrence and Philip Hamilton. He will be starring in the new film In the Heights, coming out in June. We have some more shots of Anthony here and another cast member. And then we're going to transition to the next morning because I didn't want to go and watch out the Tonys from the actual theater. I stayed in my hotel room and watched and celebrated from there. So the next morning, I went ahead and got ready for the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and the Empire State Building. So we had a launch point. For me, it was in Liberty State Park in New Jersey. And so I went to the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, and then returned to Battery Park, New York. So getting to the islands, they suggest that you only purchase your tickets through authorized concessionaires, since the only cost to visit the ferry or to visit the islands is the ferry ride, which should cost between $20 and $25. When I went, it was statecruises.com, I believe, and at this time it still is, since no private boats can dock on the islands. The only way to get there is through the ferry. Crown reservation slots do fill fast, typically 3 to 6 months in advance. So if you're planning a trip, you'll need to plan in advance for Crown or Pedestal reservations, as those do go quickly. There is a hard hat tour option available at Ellis Island of the unfinished hospital that is not yet open to the public. It is not ADA compliant. It has many restrictions, and it is the only visit that will cost you more because it is a 1-hour guided tour. Ferry tickets will get you to both islands, as you can travel from your port in either New York or New Jersey and then get to whichever island you want to go to first, spend as much time as you want there, and then go to the other island. You can even ferry between the islands all day and then return to whichever port you want. The reason you can leave and go from whatever port in New York or New Jersey, the Liberty State Park or Battery Park, is because of a long-standing territory dispute between the states of New York and New Jersey as to who owns the islands. The dispute started in the early 1800s and wasn't resolved until the late 1900s, where it was decided that both states partially own each island. So that is why you can leave from New York or New Jersey, and either way, they each have the same amount of Pedestal and Crown reservation slots. So just because one is currently sold out, you might try the other port to see if they have some available. So we'll get a little bit of background on the Statue of Liberty here. And so if you get an actual look at the statue, you'll see that the pedestal and the Lady Liberty are about the same height. If you took her down off the pedestal, she would stand almost the same height as her pedestal. You do need the advance reserve ticket to be allowed into the pedestal or crown. You cannot purchase them same day or request them same day. The original torch was replaced at the statue's centennial in 1984, as a restoration project with a replica installed in November of 1985. That replica was later formally dedicated on the 4th of July of 1986. The original Statue of Liberty Museum was in the pedestal base. It was quite compact in there, and so they decided to invest in a new $100 million museum on the northwest corner of the island. The old pedestal museum could only house about 20% of the island's visitors, whereas the new museum has a more open flow pattern and can easily house everyone who wants to visit the island. We see here the open flow and design of the new museum, which was started construction in October of 2016, just a few months after my visit. And then we see a shot of the original torch standing in its new home behind Lady Liberty. Here we have another shot of the new museum. I did take these off of the National Parks website. This is where the torch lies in the entrance with the copper replica of Lady Liberty's face that you are allowed to touch, pose with, and take pictures with. It's another beautiful part that they have as an experience while visiting the museum, as a life-size replica that you can interact with. So now we're going to go over my visit and the pedestal museum, the old one. So here we had, you can already see it is much smaller in there. This was the entrance where the original torch sat for almost 20 years or so, maybe a little more than 20 years, until they moved it to the new pedestal museum. This is another angle, and then a shot of the Statue of Liberty as we approached on the ferry. This is the cornerstone of the statue, on her pedestal that was laid in 1884 and rededicated in 1962. Here's another shot of her and some of her dedication plaques, the original dedication plaques. Here are some life-size copper replicas that the museum provides for you to interact with, touch, pose with, lay on, whatever you want to do, so you can experience Lady Liberty and how truly massive she is. They also have moldings in the museum that display how she was cast with her copper visage, and it's just a wonderful experience. Here are a few different models that you can see of the pedestal base that were options before they chose the one that she rests on now. And now we're going to get a little bit of background on Ellis Island. There are 3 total floors that are open to the public, with hard hat tours in limited numbers to parts of the island that are not yet open to the public. The ground floor is the entrance and baggage room, which features actual luggage pieces from the time of operation of the island. It also features exhibits on the history of immigration, and when I was there, if you wanted to pay for it, they had a feature where you could run your family's analysis and get that either mailed or emailed back to you after they were done with it, of your family's history in America. On the second floor is the registry room, the most iconic part possibly of Ellis Island, and the hearing room. On the third floor, there's dormitory rooms, a Restoring Ellis Island exhibit, and a Silent Voices exhibit that features a lot of the deteriorated like signs and just parts of the island, like bedding and regular stuff that had been just set aside from when the island was abandoned from 1954 to 1986. So this will be my experience to the island and my visit. We have the main entrance here under this glass walkway, which leads right into the luggage room. A lot of these pieces were so heavy that people couldn't carry them through to the registry room. So they left them in the luggage room, and as you can see, they got left behind. Because there was no organization to the luggage room. So these are people's actual pieces of luggage that were lost over time, and that the museum now has on display as you first walk in. Here's one of the courtyards that's sealed off now, and then the registry room. The registry room is again one of the most iconic parts of Ellis Island. The unfortunate part of it is that if you can imagine all of the people in this room right now, in this photo, trying to be as quiet as we could, because if one person dropped something, knocked into something, said something a little too loud, the reverberation would be a nightmare. The reverberation of this room powered everything you said or did about tenfold. So if you can imagine that, but with 5,000 people a day on average funneling into this room to face their legal and medical exams in order to determine whether or not they could be allowed entry into the country, this room takes on a whole another massive meaning. And the eerie chill that you get from being inside a place so quiet and yet so filled is just awe-inspiring and jaw-dropping. Along the balconies there, on the top, where the flags are and other people are walking, are where those dormitory rooms are. They used to be 2 long dormitories, just one on each side of the balcony, that ran for the length of the balcony. After a time, the rooms were sectioned off into 14 rooms each on each side that were also dormitory rooms. And upstairs as well on that second floor, or third floor, was an exhibit that examines the causes and effects of the rush of immigration to the United States from 1880 to 1924. Here we have a beautiful window that I was able to get a wonderful shot out of. That was in the registry room, and I think on the stairwell between the second and third floor. Next will feature the next shot will feature my arrival back to New York City. I ferried back to Battery Park as I was going to the Empire State Building, and I didn't need another cab ride from New Jersey, so I figured I could walk it. But here is the Battery Park Tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. I started walking up Broadway, and I walked past Trinity Church. It was already getting a little late in the day, so I didn't have time to go in or to look at the grounds and visit the grounds. I also passed by One World Trade Center and the Memorial. This is the Oculus at 3 World Trade Center, just across from the Memorial. That is a train depot, mall, and tribute as well to the World Trade Center. The next slide will feature the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. And here's a better shot of each, the left one being the Brooklyn and the right being the Manhattan. So the next thing we're going to learn about, since I was arriving at the Empire State Building soon, is going to be the Empire State Building background. The site was originally home to the gilded Waldorf Astoria Double Hotel. It was demolished in 1929 to begin construction for the world's tallest building. Now, this tallest building was designed in Art Deco style, took 1 year to build, and stands 1,250 feet tall at the roof and 1,450 feet tall, 54 feet tall at the antenna. Since it was built during the Great Depression, the owners didn't see profits until the 1950s. The spire of the building, the upper part of the building, the spire, was intended originally as an airship docking, or as you know them today, blimps. So it was meant for a docking station, but due to Manhattan obstructions, i.e. other skyscrapers, and the winds, high winds at that altitude, it was not suitable for airship docking, unfortunately. That, and when airships dock, they have to release ballast, i.e. water, in order to maintain their steadiness, which would be dropped directly below onto the streets of Manhattan. So the nearest they came to having any blimps dock on the spire of the Empire State Building came in 1931, when a Navy airship was able to tie off, but had to release after just 5 minutes. It couldn't dock anyone and had to release due to high winds. 2 weeks after that, a Goodyear blimp was able to toss a stack of newspapers to the roof in a publicity stunt, and thus ended the building's interactions and with any sort of airships. Visitors can experience the 86th and 102nd floors. You do need a reserve ticket. I believe those tickets have time slots for when you can enter. You can spend as much time up there as you want, but you do have to enter at your reserve time. And you can find those tickets on the Empire State Building's website. Here's an external shot of the entrance to the Empire State Building. Here's another full building exterior shot. And on the right here, a shot I think we all recognize from the 2003 motion picture film, Elf, as the main entrance to the Empire State Building. So here is where you enter on the 86th floor. And the next few slides are going to be shots of the New York City skyline. Here we have Pepsi Cola, the Comcast NBC building sitting in front of Central Park. More of the New York City skyline. I honestly, as soon as I landed, fell in love with this city. If you can see here in the left photo, we have Macy's down there. Here's a downward shot that I took, and then another one here on the right from the 102nd floor. You can see the reflections in the glass as the winds up there get a little too chaotic for them to not be contained. The elevator to get you to the 102nd floor is actually a manual operator, or was when I visited. It was a manually operated elevator that told you how high you were going instead of what floor you were going. I think, from what I recall, they renovated in 2019 to make this elevator glass, and they even renovated the 102nd floor to make it more viewing appropriate. This is me saying one final goodbye and, of course, taking another selfie with the New York City skyline. finishing things up. Here's a photo from my first day and photos from my last day. I was able to visit so many stores. I visited Hershey's and the M&M store. Both have swirling figures and dancing M&Ms. I will tell you this. The Disney store is 3 stories of fun. I visited Bubba Gump Shrimp and the Hard Rock just to get everybody and myself little trinkets. And then here we have me trying to figure out how to fit all of those little trinkets and memories into my small duffel bag and my oversized purse. And then my victory upon that. I want to thank you for joining me in my program today. We look forward to seeing you on future Brown Bag Travels, and I hope you enjoyed my trip to New York as much as I did.